Hi, I'm Clarkstown Supervisor George Hoehmann, and welcome to another edition of Hometown Happenings. You know, summer's in full bloom here in Clarkstown. Our pools are open, our parks are getting wonderful use, and it's a great time to be here in Clarkstown. We've also undertaken some new initiatives. We've announced our Office of Code Compliance here within the town of Clarkstown, which will really be targeting quality of life issues, nuisance issues, and in particular illegal housing and misuse of property within the town of Clarkstown. We brought on a prosecutor within our town attorney's office to help us with that, and additional code enforcement officers to make sure that we're ensuring that all people within the town of Clarkstown can fully enjoy their home and that property is not being illegally converted or misused, and that we're really addressing quality of life crimes. For more information about the Office of Code Compliance, you can contact my office in the town of Clarkstown at 639-2050, or you can go to the town attorney's office as well, 639-2060, or you can contact us via our website at www.clarkstown.org. You'll see a slide during this show that will also be listing all of our summer concerts in the park and hours of operation for our pools. So spend some time this summer enjoying your family here within the town of Clarkstown and all that we have to offer. Coming up on this show, in this edition of Hometown Happenings, we have the three wonderful guests: Diane Serratori, the Executive Director of People to People, Rockland's Food Pantry, located here in Clarkstown. They'll be talking about their services, followed by Barry Fixler, Veteran of the Year for Rockland County in 2010, who's pledged to raise over $1 million through the sale of his book, Semper Cool, and other fundraising activities to help wounded warriors. Barry's a Vietnam vet, highly decorated. And our final guest, Gordon Wren, the Director of Fire and Emergency Services here in Rockland County, who will discuss some of the initiatives from his office and how he's partnering with the town of Clarkstown to combat the scourge of illegal housing within Rockland County. So stay tuned for this edition of Hometown Happenings. And our first guest of this show is Diane Serratori, the Executive Director of People to People, Rockland's Food Pantry. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for really being our guest on the show, and really for your service to Rockland County. And you know, People to People is located here in Clarkstown, but it's really Rockland's Food Pantry. It's the largest food pantry here within the county. You do such wonderful work, so thank you for that service.
Thank you. Being located in Clarkstown is really incredibly beneficial to us because it's centrally located, and where we are on West Nyack Road, it's very easy for people from all over the county to get to us via 303, 304, 59, the thruway. So being situated in Clarkstown and in Nanuet makes it very possible for us to generate the kind of donations and in-kind gifts that we get from folks who drive by and want to drop things off. So it's a great location for us.
So for the benefit of our viewers, who maybe they've heard about People to People, they have some passing reference, maybe they've even made some donations, but they don't really know the full gamut of what People to People does. Maybe you could give an overview of the organization, how long you've been there as the Executive Director, and the services, basic services that People to People provides.
People to People is 27 years old this year, and it started in Nyack by a small group of folks with great hearts and great hopes for their community. The need in the community grew, so they moved to another spot on Mountain View Avenue in Valley Cottage. The need continued to grow, so in 2004 they moved to the site in Nanuet. I started there as Executive Director in 2008 and had worked with my predecessor Dolores when they were at what we call the little hole in the wall in Valley Cottage. So when I came to the building in Nanuet, I went, oh my gosh, this place is gigantic. A year later, after being there for a year, I said, oh my gosh, this place is too small. So we've done a lot of work to try to make it more manageable and make it possible for us to store more things, because the need in this community has grown significantly. We saw a significant increase in the number of people who need help in putting food on their tables after the 2008 recession. The mission of People to People is to help our struggling neighbors through difficult times with dignity. And unfortunately, since 2008, we have seen a staggering increase in the number of people who are struggling to make ends meet here in the community. you know, I grew up here. I know you've spent most of your life here. And we want to build a community that it has a space for everyone. And that's what People to People tries to do, to make it possible for single mothers and veterans and seniors who are having trouble making ends meet, but who are part of the fiber of our community. We want to make it possible for them to at least feed their kids and feed their family. Our food pantry is our largest program. We feed about 4,000 people a month. We provide 2 weeks of groceries. We have really stepped up our efforts to provide fresh fruits and vegetables, and we're able to do that by working with companies and retailers here in Nanuet, including BJ's and Target and Fairway. We pick up from those stores almost every day produce that, you know, isn't pretty enough for them, but certainly good enough for us. And we feel like it's better to put it on people's tables than to have somebody throw it away. Right. So we've stepped up our efforts to try to make sure that the food is a little more nutritious. We work with the Rockland Farm Alliance. We've got memberships there that are donated by like Orange and Rockland and Active so that we can get additional fresh fruits and vegetables for our clients. We also have a program called Back to School with Dignity, which I think is one of the most important things we do. It provides children from low-income families all throughout the county with a brand new backpack and grade appropriate school supplies that they have with them on the first day of school, so they're ready to start school successfully just like everybody else.
And that's a tremendous program because you know, obviously, poverty knows no bounds and no limit, and it's really can be dehumanizing for a young person. They don't know why their parents don't have the means, but they don't have the supplies, right. and they still need them. And so this is a way in which people can in need can really get connected, and you could really, you know, kind of help bridge that gap for a family, for a young person.
Right, because, you know, we all know education is key to breaking the cycle of poverty. So if these kids don't start school with the tools that they need so that they can be positive about their experience, then school is not going to be a pleasant place for them, and they're going to have a hard time getting through and getting the education they need to become contributing members of our community. And if that happens, then I would say we'll be feeding them for the rest of their lives, and that I would say that's a plan with flaws. So back to school is vitally important to us. We get corporate grants to purchase a lot of the supplies, but so many local businesses and real estate agents and community organizations, they do school supply collections and provide those items to us. In addition, I have to tell you that the Clarkstown retired teachers donate about $2,000 a year just for this program every year because they're retired, but they still care tremendously about the students in this area that need help. So that's a biggie. We also have a clothing closet, and people donate gently used clean, gently used clothing, and our clients can pick a few items per family member when they come to pick up their monthly food packages. At the end of the year, our big thing is Project Joy. That is actually People to People started with the Santa Project. I didn't know that until I got there. Again, these folks realized that some families didn't have the means to get their kids holiday gifts, so they started like a secret Santa for families. And then they realized, well, gee, if they can't get these kids holiday gifts, they're having trouble even feeding them. Right. So the food pantry actually grew out of the holiday gift program, and today it's incredible. Our donors it really resonates with our donors. I'll be very honest with you, when I got there and I saw how much work goes into this, I said the Normandy invasion required less logistics than matching up 1,000 families with 1,000 donors. But our donors really like it, and that's important to us as an organization that relies on donations. So every year, about 2,000 kids get holiday gifts and warm clothing from civic groups, teachers, schools, hospitals, individuals. It really is people helping people. You know, you don't have to be a millionaire to make a difference in this community. Right. And that's what People to People makes possible for so many folks. I believe if we all do a little bit, we can make a big difference in our community, and we're doing what we can to make sure that happens.
Right. And this show is going to air is airing in July. You know, we're taping it a few weeks beforehand, but there's ways in which people can get connected. You know, in the couple of minutes we have left, I know that you have a few changes, a few things that you're doing with the facility we could talk about, but maybe you can give your information now as well. If people want to participate in any of these fundraising activities, you also look for volunteers to
always
help
looking
out.
for volunteers. Very honestly, I would say we have a small but mighty staff at People to People. We have 5 full-time employees and 4 part-time employees. We're a $4 million organization, and it takes a lot of logistics and heart and time and energy to manage all of that. $3 million of that is in-kind stuff, donated cans of corn, donated clothes, donating school supplies. So without an army of volunteers, we would not be able to do this. We have about 30 volunteers there every day, from corporate volunteers to civic groups to retirees to school-aged kids who need to get their community service for their National Honor Society. It's vitally important that these folks are there to help us, because about 50 to 60 families come to people every day, and we need the support of volunteers to make it possible for us to provide our services. In fact, the federal government has this dollar value for volunteers. I think it's $27 an hour. I really have no idea where they get that from. But if we had to pay our volunteers, it would cost me about $500,000 a year, and I don't have that. Right. So we're very grateful that the volunteers are there to help us. People that are interested in supporting any of our programs could go to our website, and that's www.people2peopleinc.org, and it lists all our programs, show how you can support it. We actually have on there like a shopping list, the kind of food we need for our food pantry, and we have a shopping list for the kind of school supplies we need. So you can kind of identify what you'd like to do to help, and we can make that possible.
Right. And just briefly, we have maybe a minute left. Talk a little bit about some of the exciting new upgrades that you have coming at your facility.
When we moved into the building in 2004, 2005, the second floor was not finished. And on the second half of the building, the second floor did not exist. So we finished off the second floor, moved our offices upstairs so we can expand the client services space, so that when we interview our clients for their other needs, it's more private. They're not out, with a lot of other people. We're going to be installing a mesh mezzanine so we can double the storage capacity, not just for our clients, but it'll make it possible for some of the smaller faith-based and community food pantries who can't always drive to Cornwall on, a Friday. They can come to us when they can. So the mezzanine will help us provide more storage. We're also putting in all new cold storage, walk-in refrigerators and walk-in freezers, because again, this equipment is from 2005. It's very hard to repair because they don't make the parts anymore, and it's certainly not as energy efficient as we should be. So new cold storage, more storage space, and increasing the capacity for classroom space so we can work with other organizations to provide enhancements for our clients so that they can make their world a better place.
Right. I can tell you, and tell our viewers as well, I spent 21 years working in the not-for-profit sector before becoming supervisor earlier this year. And you have a reputation second to none as a very dynamic executive director. You've really moved people to, I think, the next level, and you're moving them even beyond to the level beyond that.
Thank you.
And it's an astounding number, 4,000 people a month that you're serving. And those are people that otherwise would be unserved, underserved, or unserved, and the quality of their life would be so much worse without your efforts and the efforts of people to people. So I really commend you on that. And
I don't do this by myself.
Yeah.
I have a great board, great staff, lots of volunteers, and incredible supporters like you.
Right. So I commend you on and everybody at People to People for what you do, because having worked, as I said, in not-for-profit, we had a small food pantry over at our place, and I know the logistics that went into us with a small food pantry that was serving a few hundred people a month, just what you're going through to be able to, and that's just one aspect of your business. I mean, the Project Joy, which I've participated in through my Rotary Club throughout the years, as well as personally, and then the other efforts with the Back to School Supply Drive, which is I think the largest in the county that's done. And that's, there's some real target areas, the East Ramapo School District, and a lot of folks in that in poverty in around the county that without People to People, they wouldn't know where to go. It would be taxing government resources and the volunteers and the staff over there. You really are making a mighty impact for a small organization.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So thank you for being my guest. And
you.
And if you could just give your contact information again, if folks want to contact you or to donate or to volunteer to get more information.
Our phone number is 845-623-4900. Our website is peopletopeopleinc.org, and like us on Facebook, because that's where we tell lots of people about what we do.
Right. So Diane, thank you again for being my guest this month.
Thank you.
My next guest is Barry Fixler, a local jeweler, business owner, and Veteran of the Year. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you, George.
So, Barry, I've known you for years. For the benefit of our viewers, we've been in the same Rotary Club together for 16 years, the Clarkstown Sunrise Rotary. But I'm so impressed with you as a person and what you've done within our community. Not only being a very successful business owner, owner of Barry's Estate Jewelry, and involved in several other business enterprises. You've had decorated service in Vietnam. You've been recognized as a Veteran of the Year. You've had a fairly colorful life experience. You've written a book, Semper Cool, and you've pledged to raise $1 million for wounded vets within our community, and you're well on your way to that goal. Your reputation really speaks for itself, and I want to thank you for being my guest. And we'd like to maybe talk a little bit about your background, a little bit about some of the initiatives that you're involved with. So, let's start off, Barry. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, for the benefit of our viewers, about your service in the military.
Oh, I went into the service, the Marines, right after high school. My senior year in high school, I knew I was joining the Marines. I didn't tell not one of my friends. Everybody was going to college. I knew they would talk me out of it. Graduated high school at 18. When just a few months later, went right in, went through boot camp, all the training. And probably within a year later, I was in a combat zone fighting for my life in Vietnam. Sort of a year later, I'm just pushing 19 years old and got into a little bit over my head.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about just some of your service. I know, and I want to talk a little bit about your book, Semper Cool, which is a great read. I've actually read it twice, and I have an autographed copy that when it first came out, and I know all the proceeds from the sale of Semper Cool, you're donating to help wounded veterans, and you've done some wonderful stuff with that. But on the photo that graces the cover of Semper Cool, there's a picture of you with several other folks. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the guys in that photo.
That photo is very heartfelt, and it's very dear to me. After I trained for nearly a year before we got into the combat zone, into war, we were told that 1/3 of us are going to be killed in the next year. 1/3 of us are going to have our legs blown off, and only 1/3 of us will make it back to the States and whole. And for me, I'm that 1/3. Looking at the picture, you see 3 Marines. I'm in the center. The fellow to my left, his name is Stan Pettit. He was killed just a few days after that picture. He got shot, actually got shot in the head. Stan Pettit's father was a World War II veteran, so when Stan turned 18, he went right into the Marines. The fellow to my left happened to just pass away a year ago, and he lost both legs. So I'm in the center. I made it back to the States in great shape mentally and physically. I felt very proud of myself, and at that point in my early 20s, after my service in the Marines, after my 3 years, I knew I have to give back. I'm so blessed that we have such a great country. Since I'm married in my early 20s, and my wife and I would do functions, whatever it was, from Cancer Society, Heart Foundation, just giving back, and giving back. But that cover is very, very dear to me.
Right, and it's an amazing photo because it's 3 young men with everything to live for in a combat zone, and it's exactly what you said. Statistically, 1/3 will die, 1/3 will be injured, and 1/3 will come home unscathed physically. And the odds, that's what it was for that photo. And I remember hearing you speak when you first came out with your book, Semper Cool, which which people can pick up through Amazon. They can pick up online. They can pick up in our local Barnes & Noble, or they can pick it up at your store,
Sure.
Barry's Estate Jewelry over in Bardonia. And for any of the books that you're selling, the proceeds go to support wounded vets. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, before we move on to the organizations. You have a foundation that you've established, and another foundation that you're supporting, that you're helping wounded veterans. Maybe you could give us just a little more of your experience in Vietnam. I mean, you served there for 3 years. You were there during the height of the war, correct?
Right. Tet Offense. I got in country July of 1967, and I rotated out of Vietnam August of 68. So I was there in a combat zone for a little over 13 and a half months. It was hard. It was very hard. We were always on alert. We were sleep deprived. Ammunition was extremely important. There were a few times during the time we ran out of total water, ran out of food, and there was and from January of 1968 to April of 68, there was a 77-day battle called Siege of Quezon. Mm-hmm. And I was in a company of Marines, which were only 150 Marines, on a hilltop. Mm-hmm. And at a hilltop, we fought out of trenches, and the trenches looked like, when you see pictures of World War I, the Germans and the Americans fighting out of trenches, it's exactly, it was that primitive and that crude. Mm-hmm. So I was in that battle for all of 77 days, and we started with 150 Marines. Of course, we won, but at least 1/3 of those Marines were killed. At least another, probably more than a third of those Marines were severely wounded. When we got relieved to come off the hill, I looked around at faces, and there was so many replacements, like 2/3 of the company, which we started 150 Marines, were all different faces I just didn't recognize. And at that time, I felt myself very fortunate that probably less than 1/3 that remained an original Marine through the battle.
Wow. The Tet Offensive is really that was a time in the war, that was probably one of the low points in the Vietnam War. A major offensive that really took the lives of thousands of U.S. veterans, U.S. personnel, service personnel, and I think more importantly, it was really kind of a bit of a turning point over here in the United States with the rise of protests, 1968, and opposition to the war. So it was a difficult time, and really in serving our country, I'm very grateful to you as somebody that hasn't served, but just tremendous respect. To you, Barry, for your service, and I want to thank you, on behalf of myself and the people of Clarkstown for your service. Now, what it brings us, more to the point, what you really kind of dedicated, I think, your life to. I mean, you're a very successful businessman. You have a bunch of different business adventures. You're involved in, I think, Falkirk Country Club. You have Barry's Estate Jewelry and
Fort Knox.
Fort Knox. A number of business entities. So folks, you can always get a great deal from Barry up at Fort Knox and at Barry's Estate Jewelry in Bardonia, right on Route 304 in Bardonia. And you've also kind of become the go-to jeweler, if you will, for just so many vets. Word is going to spread. Military personnel, active duty. I know when my nephew, who was in the Marines, when he was coming out of the Marines after serving in Iraq and had proposed to his wife, he'd actually come by the store, and you were very helpful to him, and you really take care of the vets in a very special way. But one of the things that you've really done, Barry, is by writing this book, Semper Cool, you're raising a lot of money. How much money have you raised so far, and how can people actually donate to be able to help wounded vets?
My goal's $1 million, and I'm just hovering a little bit over $400,000. That's in a 6-year period. If you go to Barnes & Noble's, if you go into Amazon, all my royalties that I get from Barnes & Noble's and Amazon goes into my foundation, and that foundation, the money goes directly to the wounded men and women. Right. If you walk into my store...
And the link to that foundation is www.fixlerfoundation.org. www Fixler, Fixler Foundation.org. There's also another foundation that you're also contributing dollars to, which is www.hopeforthewarriors.org, which is another foundation that you're contributing to help wounded vets. So folks can, go to those places. Amazon, they can go to Barnes & Noble. They can purchase your book, Semper Cool, which is a great book, and the proceeds from that will go, the royalties from that goes to these foundations. Or they can go to your store now.
Right. They can go to my store, they make a donation. The book is really, other than if you walk into Barnes & Noble's, but at my store there's no price, it's just a donation. Right. And whatever people put as a donation, 100% of that money, there's no overhead, goes right to the wounded men and women that served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And Hope for the Warriors is an organization that seeks out severely wounded veterans, and they have the ability to help them. Just let's say they need a special wheelchair for their exact needs. Hope for the Warriors makes an investigation, pays for that wheelchair, and then delivers it to the veterans. So they're very, very well organized, more so than myself. They do all the research, and it's direct. They're like my organization and that organization, both excellent.
Right. So Semper Cool is a great book. It's a great read. It really kind of talks about your experience. It's one veteran's experience in Vietnam. You have some funny stories in the book. You have some touching stories in the book. I think it's bittersweet, the photo that graces the cover of the book. It's three young, tough as nails Marines, in the prime of their life, and unfortunately, one of them loses his life, within weeks after the photo is taken. The other one is severely injured, and his life is forever altered. And you come out physically unscathed, from the service, but you never forgot. And it reminds me of Tim McGraw, the country singer, whose song earlier this year was, reached #1 on the country charts. Humble and kind. And in that song, Tim talks about, he has a line that when you get to where you're going, don't forget to turn around and look back and lend a helping hand. Barry, you've done that. You've done that throughout your career within the business community, and you've done that throughout your life, reaching back, not forgetting to look back to help the vets that came behind you, particularly the young guys from Afghanistan and Iraq that came home. I know you helped raise over $100,000 for Sergeant Eddie Ryan. A number of years ago. Eddie nearly lost his life serving in the Middle East, was shot in the head. They thought he was going to die, severely wounded, paraplegic. There was no way that he was going to be able to have the life that he has. You spearheaded an effort that brought communities together down here in Rockland, Orange County, and raised over $100,000 almost single-handedly. Then brought attention to Sergeant Ryan, was able to get him out of his home, to be out of the hospital into his home, and have his home fully modified. If that wasn't enough, you're now trying to raise an additional $1 million to help other vets. So we really thank you for, living a life where you haven't forgotten to look behind and lend a helping hand to those that came behind you. So thank you for being my guest on this edition of hometown happenings. And coming up on our next guest will be Gordon Wren, the Director of Fire and Emergency Services for Rockland County. So thank you, Barry, for being my guest.
Very well.
And welcome back. My final guest is Gordon Wren, the Director of Fire and Emergency Services for Rockland County. Welcome, Gordon.
Glad to be here, George.
So, Gordon, in the town of Clarkstown, as you know, you and I have been talking over the last number of months, and we have a new signature initiative that we've really been working on since I took office as supervisor, the Office of Code Compliance. We've added several new fire inspectors. We've added a number of new code enforcement officers. We brought on a new prosecutor to lead the code enforcement initiative. And we're really going after illegal housing and quality of life issues across the board. We're strengthening penalties within Clarkstown. But you've really led the effort here, Gordon, in Rockland County with our volunteer housing groups, along with our firefighters and emergency service personnel, to combat the scourge of illegal housing within Rockland County. So I'd like to really talk a little bit about some of the initiatives, kind of what's going on, within Rockland. And maybe we could talk a little bit also about just your office in general and what it does. So for the benefit of our viewers, maybe give us a little bit of an intro into what your office is, some of the things that you've been involved with, and then we can kind of move forward talking about some of the efforts with combating illegal housing within Rockland County.
Well, I operate out of the Fire Training Center in Pomona. It's where residents take their recyclables for hazardous materials and things. But it's a multifaceted operation. A big part of it is educating firefighters, training firefighters, and I'm also the county fire coordinator for many years. So I worry about when our firefighters go into any burning building, but when you go into a building that's been converted illegally and is occupied illegally, and then work has been done by contractors who don't get building permits, it makes it extremely, fire is dangerous to begin with, and then when you go into a building that's been converted illegally, it makes it many times more dangerous. So I owe it to those firefighters and the people that live in these places that have been illegally converted, and particularly the children. So you and I actually started to talk about this topic when you were involved in the Rockland County Planning Federation quite some time ago, and I know you campaigned, I think, on tightening things up and creating a deterrent for landlords who were thinking about converting a building or buying buildings and converting them illegally. So I commend you and your staff for the steps you've taken since you've been elected. This is a very serious problem in Rockland County. There are thousands of people living in substandard housing and working in businesses that are operating illegally. It's very dangerous, and it's sort of like a disease. It spreads. It's like gangrene. So the way to combat it is, as soon as you spot the infection, you get it under control. Otherwise, if there's no deterrent, you lose control of your town. Mm-hmm. I mean, Clarkstown is a series of beautiful hamlets. I look at Valley Cottage and Congress on Main Street. They're beautiful communities. That could change very quickly if the word gets out to the landlords that you can do this with impunity and you can make a lot of money doing it. Mm-hmm. So you're creating that deterrent by the steps you're taking. Right. And I really do thank you.
Well, and I appreciate the efforts on the part of the county. I know that we're working closely with County Executive Ed Day. We're bringing in the health department on some of these issues as well, because they can be able to gain entrance. One of the things that's already happened here within the town, within the first couple of months of my administration, we've gone into state Supreme Court. Typically in the past, we would seek to get voluntary compliance, under the prior administration with folks, and we'll still continue to do that. But we're not giving people the length of time to be able to continue to have a violation, a serious, violation on their property. Frankly, we'll bring people into justice court. We'll give them a cure period. Typically it's 5, 7, 10 days, whatever it might be, and then we bring them into justice court. And what's happened in the past is we wouldn't always go into justice court so quickly, and then we would never go beyond justice court. So we've already had two instances that I can recall, perhaps even more, where we've actually gone into state Supreme Court to obtain temporary restraining orders and injunctions against building owners and property owners that were trying to conduct illegal business practices or do illegal construction. We had a business owner that had clear-cut a piece of property on Route 303 and was starting to build his building. And he just thought this is the way things were going to go. And not now, not in Clarkstown, not under my administration. We're not going to allow that. We went into state Supreme Court, and what his attorney was told was, tell your client, and this is by the judge. The judge indicated to him, tell your client if he violates this, that the next time he comes to court, he should bring his toothbrush because he's going to jail. That's how we're going to stop illegal housing. That's how we're going to stop these issues within Clarkstown from happening. And we're going to put the word out. People need to know that what may be acceptable in other parts of the county is unacceptable in Clarkstown. There are lives at stake here, and we're not going to tolerate it here in Clarkstown. And we're putting our resources, where they need to be with staffing.
That's perfect. I mean, to make this work, you need quality, motivated, educated inspectors who know how to prepare a case when it's called for. You need a prosecutor ideally someone who's prosecuted cases in court before criminally, and then you need the judge's cooperation to levy heavy fines. In other areas of the county where the enforcement is lacking or almost non-existent, you may get a $250 civil compromise, and then more often than not, the violation, which may be cleared, they wait a few months and they go right back in to occupy it illegally over and over. Right. So I know in North Rockland there was a judge who the village asked for a $10,000 fine, and the judge said, "No, you've been here before. As a landlord, you know better. I'm fining you $20,000." And then you have to then put the building back to its original. So these landlords have spent the money to convert them illegally. Then they have to spend the money to put them back, plus the fines and legal fees. It can be very, very expensive, and that's a deterrent.
Right. So Gordon, maybe you could talk a little bit. I know you had done an awful lot of work, and you've really worked very closely with as a volunteer, long-time volunteer firefighter. I know you have a show that you typically are on WRCR on Fridays. That really highlights the volunteer firefighters, within the community. But maybe you could talk a little bit about, some of what's taking place with the declining numbers in volunteer firefighters, and how we can really kind of try and address that issue within the community.
Yes, Rockland County is unique in this area because we are still 100% volunteer, and they do great work. It's a wonderful system. However, in order for it to continue, you need a steady flow of recruits. Every year we lose people who move away, get older, and for a variety of reasons can't be active any longer. We have been the exception in New York State for many years. We haven't seen a net decline. We've been holding our own. Part of that is due to the fact that we obtained a federal grant for a little over $1 million. And that ran out. It was good we used it for 4 years, plus a couple years after that, the program's continued. So now that the program has stopped, we've seen a decline. The number of recruits has dropped fairly significantly. So we're working with a committee to address some ideas on how to develop more volunteers. And one of the things we're doing is designing a basic recruit class that's going to be offered at BOCES, so the children can go to school, take the basic firefighting without having to give up nights and weekends as they would by coming to the training center. And we've been spending a lot of time with college kids, where we find if we have a youth academy where we get 12 and 13-year-olds, and then a Explorer program. If we can get them on board when they develop that passion when they're young, they have a tendency to stay with it. But so many children go off to college, and we've been doing scholarships. But then they go off to college, and in order to get their first job, they may never come back, or they go to graduate school and never come back. But with the kids at BOCES, a lot of them are in the trades, and we're finding a high percentage will stay in the community, and they're the ones that are available during the day. Right. So this is one of the innovative things that we're trying in the coming. Our first class starts in September. And I'm hoping that's going to generate more recruits. But it's not just young people. We get people in 20s, 30s, even 40s, and 50s that join. We had a basement fire last week right on the Clarkstown border, and basement fires are very tough. And the two firefighters that pushed the line down into the basement and put the fire out, one of them joined at 50. He's 54 years old. Wow. In very good shape physically. So I was very proud of him. Told him that, and and if you have young children, you're always worried about kids and cars and drinking, and it's a bad combination with young people in the car. Have them join the ambulance corps locally here in Clarkstown or in one of the fire departments. When you go to a vehicle extrication call where people are trapped and there's been drinking involved, or just young people clowning around, driving recklessly, there's no better. It's better than seeing it on television, reading about it, or sitting in a lecture. You're seeing this up close. You see the human suffering. That's the best way to have your children become safe drivers.
Absolutely. So, Gordon, we're just about out of time. I do want to thank you for being my guest on this edition of Hometown Happenings, but I really want to thank you for the clarion call that you've been sounding for years. Thankfully, the county has taken it seriously under the leadership of the county executive through the county health department. I know that you put together some task force that you've been leading. Legal housing within Rockland County is really a tremendous problem that needs to be addressed. We're working on it on our end in Clarkstown, but you've really been a leader on this for years. in your efforts, not just with with volunteers, but your efforts as the Director of Fire and Emergency Services. We have exceptional services here in Rockland County. The county's put together a tremendous emergency management team, which you're a key part of, and I want to thank you for everything that you do to keep Rockland safe, and for the partnership that you've offered to me and to my administration and to the town of Clarkstown with some of your suggestions and some of the guidance that you've offered to help us really make sure that Clarkstown is taking this problem seriously to ensure that we're protecting the quality of life. And again, thank you for being our guest.
And thank you. And a lot of people run for election and for office, and they win. They don't always keep their campaign promises. You and County Executive Day, and especially in this area, have really kept your promises, kept your word. So good luck and keep up the good work. I look forward to working with you.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, that's all the time we have for today on this show. Again, I want to thank our guests, Diane Saratori, Barry Fixler, and Gordon Wren, for all that they do to make Rockland County and Clarkstown a better place. For more information, contact my office at area code 845-639-2050, or contact our website at www.clarkstown.org to gain more information about our summer programs, the Office of Code Compliance, or the organizations that we've highlighted on this show. Until our next show, this is Supervisor George Hoehmann. Thank you for joining us on Hometown Happenings.